Alright, so this is my English project. I'm doing the interview option. I'm going to just read off the questions about the book, and I'm going to answer them. The book is Fidel Castro, From Guerrilla to World Statesman by Richard Platt. Alright, so the first question, brief synopsis. So this book talks about the life of Fidel Castro and mainly his rise to power in Cuba. Like, he was the dictator of Cuba for probably 50 years or so. But this book was written in 2003, and Cuba wanted a new leadership in 2008. So Castro was still the dictator of Cuba when the book was written, and so it doesn't cover how he fell out of power, which is important if you were doing research. So it's set in about from 1926 when he was born to the present, 2003, the present when the book was written. The place setting, most of the story is set in Cuba, because that's where it happened. He was in Mexico for a while, but most of it's in Cuba. That's where the important stuff happened. One of the important places was the Sierra Maestra Mountains, where Castro's revolutionaries, they did their campaign there, the revolution, you know. So in the social, economic, and cultural environments, the social, it kind of shows like the inequalities between the rich minority people and the poor majority of people. The economic is about the same thing. Most of the country lived in poverty, and almost the entire economy of the country was based on sugar and cigar exports. And cultural, the book kind of shows how the people switched towards like socialist and Marxist ideas, you know, the communism, and it became more like Cuban nationalists with the revolution, what the book's kind of focused on. So number 3, what is significant about this event? So, Fidel Castro's revolution made Cuba the only communist country in the Western Hemisphere. Cuba also played a big part in the Cold War, so it relates to us because they were aligned with the Soviet Union and stuff like the Cuban Missile Crisis that happened. And also, the Cuban Revolution also inspired many other like revolutionaries across countries, so that's important. It's how it's still kind of relevant today. So in 3 or 4 ways this event affected the community. So I mean, it affected all of Cuba, every citizen of Cuba, because they lived there, it was under the government. But some ways is the land was redistributed. So like, you know, the people who worked the land owned it, and there was like a cap of how much land you could own. Many industries became nationalized, so they basically just took it from the private companies that owned it, and the government owned them. And the education, healthcare both got much better for public. The literacy rate improved a lot, I remember. Although it is worth mentioning that Castro had a very bad human rights record, so people were not treated super well under his rule. You can kind of see. So what major problems had to be overcome? There was a lot of them. Overthrowing the Batista regime, who controlled Cuba before Castro. Surviving the U.S. trade embargo, which really hurt their economy a lot. He had to survive the over 600 assassination attempts made by the CIA, and also defeat the Bay of Pigs invasion, which was a rebel invasion backed also by the CIA. Although they tried to deny it, but they did. And yes, all these problems were overcome. Him and his guerrilla forces, they overthrew the Batista regime. The economy, and during the embargo, the economy definitely struggled, but they survived with a lot of help from selling sugar to the Soviet Union. And Castro did survive all 600 of the attempts made on his life. He eventually died of natural causes in 2016, which is not mentioned in the book. That's outside research, but... And him and his army, they also managed to defeat the CIA-backed Bay of Pigs invasion. It's kind of crazy, but they used like trainer planes, like fighter jets. It's weird. They're broke. So what major people, number 7, what major people were involved in the events, and how were they influential to the outcome or affected by the outcome of the event, the revolution? So they have Spanish names, I can't read this. Che Guevara, he was, you know, a key strategist, someone that helped Castro a lot during his rise to power. There was Raul Castro, that was Fidel Castro's brother, and they were close allies, you know, good friends. He helped a lot. And there was Fulgencio Batista. He was a dictator that ruled before Castro, but he was overthrown, so that's how he was affected. I don't know if they executed him or not. I think he might have lived, but. And also, like, just the Cuban population, just the people, they were definitely affected because it's where they live, you know. So what do you admire or dislike about this person / events or situation? So I admire his persistence and how he didn't give up the fight despite being knocked down a lot, you know. I also admire how he was dedicated to education and healthcare. That's important. But I dislike his communist, socialist views, how he was a dictator, and also his many human rights violations. It's not good. And so what elements of the story can I relate to? I relate to his dedication to what he believed in, really fighting for his beliefs. So, do you think this situation, event / aftermath will affect people in the future? Well, I mean, this is kind of the future of what could happen in the past, but it still inspires movements, definitely, to this day, like social justice and uprisings. I think it probably will continue to do so because Castro's story was kind of inspiring. He was born like rural Cuba, and he came in control, the leader. So what new things have I learned? I learned more about the life of Fidel Castro. I learned more about the Cuban Revolution. I learned more about like the Cuban Missile Crisis, but more from the Cubans' point of view, like how they saw it, because I already kind of knew about it from the American point of view, because we were kind of the other side on that, but I didn't know about it from theirs, and it's actually quite interesting. And what is the greatest value of the book? Question 12. I think its greatest value is how it explores the life of Fidel Castro, kind of what the book's made for. It's not like, if you're researching Fidel Castro, I want to use this book specifically, but it'd be a good starting point maybe, because this doesn't cover like more of like his personal life, or more, it doesn't go super far into depth in some things, and also the book was written before he fell out of power and before he died, so you can't really capture like his whole life story, but it still is a very good source, I'd say.